feel like the metaphors in life between sports and music have really helped shape me. But I feel like rugby in particular has been such a positive metaphor in life for me of like, know that you've got people who are gonna come behind you and tackle, like get rid of that ball, know someone's gonna be there, and you've got to get behind, right? And so like it is one of the sports that I've played that I think has been the most confidence building and like trust building for my life. And it's so cool that you're still a part of it. But I think about that a lot. Like you're not going to drop the ball and you're going to have people who are right behind you. Like you got to duck down, cover your head and let them go ahead of you. Like, you know, that kind of thing. And it's been a really, I like that we have that sport in common because like I think it really has actually helped me in my career and especially now. Like that trust factor that you have to have in order to be a successful rugby player. It has definitely helped me when I'm not exactly sure what the next step is going to be.
Join me, Jeremy Swick, on Into the Unknown, a podcast that delves into the personal journeys, stories, and experiences of individuals across diverse professions. As a historian by trade, I firmly believe that our personal histories shape our present and offer valuable insights into our paths ahead. With that being said, let's get into it. On this episode, Into the Unknown, I am joined with a very special guest, Meghan DeFord. How are you doing today, Meghan?
I'm doing great. How are you doing?
You know, I'm doing amazing. I'm really excited for this conversation today.
Me too. Thanks for having me on. This will be really fun.
So, I always like to kick off the show and talk to the importance of networking. How are we connected?
I love this. So I did a little bit of research on you before I came in because I responded to basically a call of guests on your podcast. And I love that you're a historian. So we have that in common of loving history. But we have a mutual connection in Omar Eaton Martinez, interestingly enough. And I know Omar from University of Maryland. So I'm not sure how you know Omar. And then we also have a connection in rugby, which is so interesting. I was a scrum half. I played at University of Maryland many, many years ago. So that's kind of cool.
It really is awesome, those small connections. And I actually know Omar. He spoke at the Wisconsin Historical Society, and he was our keynote speaker a few years back. But it's funny because I left the museum field, I guess you could technically say, about a year ago. I went in all in on my company, Swick Media. That being said, I stay heavily involved in the museum space. I go to the yearly convention or summit every year in Wisconsin, and it's nice because I get to connect with my museum people. I spent a decade in that field, and I loved every second of it. And it was probably one of the tougher reasons for me to leave the museum field, just because of how passionate I was about that space and kind of that area. And I was fortunate through different experiences to actually still work in the museum field every once in a while. I created the Women's Rugby Foundation's museum aspect of their website. And so I got to do deep dive in history of women's rugby, which was a ton of fun. And then, of course, as you mentioned, playing rugby, I'm fortunate. I've been playing 17 years now. I'm a hooker. And so it's always just a really cool, kindred spirits when you meet a fellow rugby player.
Totally. Your knees are still good? They're hanging on?
My knees are still good. I tore my hamstring about a year and a half ago, and I was battling back, and this was the first year I felt really good about playing again. I had a game about 2 weeks ago, and so
Cool.
still holding up. So I'm giving it a few more years.
I love it. That's awesome. Yeah, you're going to keep going. I love it. But I love how the world is so small. I mean, we are complete strangers and we have connections. And I think that's beautiful. And I love what you're doing here.
I really appreciate it. So, of course, we're going to jump into your origin story. But first, I want to ask a little bit, how'd you get into rugby?
Great question. So I grew up playing sports. Like I grew up playing soccer, basketball, softball. And then when I went to Maryland, I was actually in the gym, in the weight room. And in Maryland's main gym in Epley, there's like an upstairs room and a downstairs room. And the downstairs area is like kind of like more like serious, or at least it was at the time. And that's where I was. And we were starting a women's rugby team. So someone just came up to me and was like, "Hey, we're starting a women's rugby team. Are you interested?" And I was like, "Yeah, sure." And that's how like I got involved in it. I was a sporty person and yeah, and it just went from there, and that person ended up becoming my roommate junior year. And but she and her boyfriend, now husband at the time, or boyfriend at the time, now husband, um, they had both played rugby. He was on the men's team, and the men's team helped the women's team tremendously. Like, there's no way we would have gotten as big as quickly without the men's team. So it was really cool.
That really is neat, and I always just love how people, find rugby, or I should
Yeah.
say, rugby finds them is usually
Finds
what it
them.
is.
Yeah, 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 yeah. It definitely was not something that I grew up in a really rural town in Maryland, and it definitely was not on anyone's radar there. I mean, I think I'd probably seen it maybe in the Olympics or on TV or something like that, but it wasn't anything I was familiar with. But I love contact sports, and that was very appealing to me. So I was like, yeah, sure, let me try it out, and the rest was history.
I really love that. I really love that. So tell me a little bit more about your origin story. You mentioned you grew up in rural Maryland. Let me
Yeah.
hear a little bit more about that.
Yeah, yeah. So I did warn you beforehand, I'm a yapper. So I'm gonna try and like keep it tight. So I did grow up in a really rural part of Howard County, Maryland. Like, I know how to shear a sheep. Like, there was a drive your tractor to school day in high school. And I went to University of Maryland. I got an undergrad degree in English literature and language. I absolutely loved my degree. And we were the first in our family to go to college. And from there, I stayed. I had a pretty boring resume for a while, but you had asked about sort of that fork in the road and origin story. And I had started my career in college admissions. So, like, going out, recruiting students, getting them to apply to Maryland, making decisions, like reviewing applications, and then converting those students while still recruiting. And I started working with alumni and within that role. And there was a mentor of mine who worked on campus. Her name was Barb Quinn. And she was like, "You're really good at this. Like, you're really good with the alums and the donors. Have you ever considered that?" And that was not necessarily a fork in the road, but that was definitely a part of my origin story as an adult. So I was like, no. And I really like that work. And I started looking at it, right? So then I got into fundraising and alumni engagement, or community engagement is probably an easier way to think about it. And Maryland was at a really interesting time, like most universities, the 2008, 2010 economic crash. Like, I think a third of the fundraising staff had been laid off or furloughed. And we were really in a rebuilding mode. So I started working with our alums in the Northeast, about 50,000 at the time. And then that ended up being working with all of our alumni. There were like 56 clubs at the time, 350,000 alumni, and getting more into fundraising. So I built up that team, worked with alums, worked with major gift officers, really exciting stuff. And that's how I started in philanthropy. And I spent close to the next 20 years working in fundraising and community engagement, and then in leadership roles. So that's kind of the origin story there.
What do you think drew you to that kind of fundraising aspect of the admissions process and all that?
Yeah, I think someone that's a great question that I actually haven't thought about. I think someone in leadership probably saw that I could talk to a wall. And I'm just really interested in people. And I think I was just probably the person that they were like, she is, she's an alumna herself. She can connect with these people. She understands the discretion of the process itself without, um, I don't know, like, being an alum and being a donor to the university didn't impact the decision, but I was really good at just like breaking that down for people and saying, like, look, I'm your point of contact. I get how much you love the university. Our job is not to keep your student out. Our job is to get them in. And in a worst case scenario, the worst case scenario is you don't get in. And then we talk about how you get in, right? And so I think someone just saw that in me, and saw how I was connecting to people and just recommended it. And I think I also was really good at dealing with colleagues, of managing expectations at like 25, 26 years old. Like I look back sometimes at the things that I did and said in a good way, and I'm like, where did that come from? Because I was like any 20-year-old, like, I was crazy. But like, I remember saying to people, one of my lines was always like, "Do you appreciate honesty?" And that really helped with a lot of conversations. But I was like, how did I come up with that at that age? So I think someone just saw something in me and was like, let her try it. And, and I ended up being really good at it. And for someone who yaps as much as I do, what I learned very quickly is if you stop talking, people will tell you everything. And it's just one or two really good pointed questions like you're doing, and be quiet and start listening. And I was able to really hone my skills in doing that. And then, really, again, being able to find connections, because fundraising is all about what is the need and who has an interest and how you can put those two together. And really beautiful, amazing things can come from that. So I think being able to start honing that in the admissions process and then taking it to another level in philanthropy, I think there was just kind of a natural skill set that I had that I was able to hone within that.
Megan, that makes a lot of sense, and I appreciate it because I think you exposed the secret of my podcasting style is, let people share their experiences. But I think there really is something when people see that kind of gift or that light in you, it's really neat, even if they maybe don't mention it exactly like that. But I think it's a way for you to start growing as a person, as a career, as a career position. And I think it's really cool to see that someone else sees that in you, even if you don't see it in yourself. As you mentioned, you're like, oh, how did I come up with that? It's like, okay, someone saw that and gave you the opportunity to kind of hone that skill.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And so I also have a podcast. And the reason I started it was because I would meet all of these really fascinating people in my job, right? And most of whom you will never know their names, right? And um, no one thinks their story is interesting. And if you can just get them going, and the podcast is called Wait, What Do You Do Again? Because it's like, people are like, oh, I work in business. And you're like, okay, whatever. And then when you get into it, you're like, wait, what do you do? Like, you do something really cool, whatever it is. And so, exactly to your point, I think someone saw that in me and was like, wait, what did you just say? Or like, wait, how did you just maneuver that? And yeah, just went and off I went and did it. And it was also just a really good timing period, right? Like they were rebuilding, and I was able to just kind of go in and try things and do things, and they worked. And I had really great colleagues around me, and we worked as a team, and it just was kind of a magical time in terms of like putting all of those things together.
Megan, I really appreciate that. And I love that podcast title because I can completely feel that in my soul because sometimes it sounds like what I've done in my life has been made up from, working. I was the historian and curator at the College Football Hall of Fame. I worked at the
Yeah.
Pro Hall. I was in education for a while, and now I all in my business. And so it's funny because with some, of course, people kind of ask, "What do you do?" And it depends on the conversation tone. Sometimes I'm just like, "Oh, I work in the digital space
Yeah.
or something like that." If we have more time, I'm like, "Well, this is going to sound made up, but here's what here's what I do, or here's what I've done." So I definitely appreciate that.
And I don't know
So
about you, but
go ahead.
I'm nosy. I'm like, wait, what does that mean? Like I am a curious person. And so I think we have similar superpowers there.
I would tend to agree. Sometimes I just say I'm a storyteller, and they're like, "What does that mean?" And then
Yeah,
we can take it wherever we want to go with it.
totally.
Fork in the road. Can you give me a time in your life where you just went for it and how it turned out?
Yeah, so it was pretty recently, actually. So I did all of that at Maryland. I was recruited to Florida Atlantic University to head up their alumni association and annual giving, and that's why I'm in Florida now. And then I held some subsequent jobs, executive director, director, senior leadership jobs in fundraising. But the first fork in the road, I really resisted the fork in the road, and that's kind of what I wanted to talk a little bit about today. The first fork in the road was I was recruited to Florida Atlantic University. I was there for 4 years, and I got fired. And I went through a divorce over Zoom during the pandemic, and then a few weeks later got fired with no warning during the pandemic over Zoom as like a newly like breadwinner by myself with two kids mom. And it was the first time in my life I had no idea what I was going to do. Like I didn't see it coming. I thought getting fired had never happened before. Like I thought it was the worst thing that could ever happen. And I was like, oh shit, like, what do I do now? Like, and so I just kept with like, I'm a fundraiser and this is what I do. And I'm going to find a job. And everything was remote. So I was going to stay in higher ed. And that's kind of what I did. But I had this like almost, I don't like the word calling, but there was this knowing that like, you should look at doing other things. Like maybe fundraising, maybe this is a chance to look outside of fundraising. But that kind of felt scary. So I was like maybe approaching the fork, but like hedging with the fork. And during that time, I actually had listened to a podcast and listened to a guest on Nicole Byer's show. Um, and and anyway, the guy was talking about coaching, and I was like, oh, that sounds really cool and that could make me a better leader. So I went through this coaching program and I was like, wow, this is really, I'm like good at this. And this is something that I'm really interested in. And I can really help empower women, which is something that I'm really, into, go figure. And, but I was like, but I'm not going to be a coach. I'm just going to use this in my professional life. So then I like fast forward and I get other fundraising jobs and like, it's not that I wasn't good at it. It wasn't the organizations, but you just know when you're like, I don't want to do this anymore. Like I just there, but the problem is there's nothing wrong. Like I'm still doing a good job. I'm still meeting interesting donors. I'm still working for interesting organizations that are doing good in the world. It almost felt like selfish, right? Like and I finally, actually, the real fork in the road that I finally was like, you are at the fork. Like, you have to make a decision. I finally fully launched my business in February, and now I'm doing executive coaching for women and nonprofit coaching in the fundraising space, but for teams. Because what I realized in leadership is like, and I feel like you will totally get what I'm about to say. It's like, yes, I've got my team and I need to help them and with their portfolios and fundraising and all of that. I've got my portfolio of work and I have fundraising. Plus I have to think about things like the budget and why we're spending so much money on toner for the printer. You're like, oh, like, oh my God. So I felt like I could never give my teams as much time and attention as they needed. So really working with those teams to help them in more detail. And it's just funny when you look back at life. I was like, I never thought I would be doing this. But that really was like my fork in the road moment of like, you need to bet on yourself. You can get another job in fundraising. You can keep fundraising for the rest of your life and you're going to be miserable. Like nothing is ever going to be wrong. But like there's this feeling of you got to take this right instead of the left that you've been taking. So it's been relatively recent and it's been fun and exciting and scary. And you go through like all of the emotions. um, and the other thing that's been really cool about it is like embracing this new identity of myself. And like, it's not that you're getting rid of any part that got you here, but like, when I started going to networking events, it was like, oh yeah, I'm a founder. I'm a CEO. This is what I'm doing. And I'm speaking for myself, not for the organization. So that's been a really cool, kind of unexpected part of the whole journey.
Well, Megan, one of the things I can completely feel that pull of the fork in the road. There's times, especially as you're early into it, or as you start getting these hints of okay, I somehow now know I'm supposed to do something else, but I don't know what that looks like. But
Yeah.
I can feel it in my soul.
Yeah.
And as you mentioned, you're pulling back. You're trying to run the opposite way sometimes. And I think eventually it's almost like I don't know how else to describe it. Almost like a surrender, where
Yeah.
you're like, all right, I don't know what this is, but like it's going to eat me alive forever if I don't at least see how it goes. And I think also, as you mentioned, it's not like you're replacing that part of your identity. I always like to consider that they're just parts of that building block.
Right.
I went to school for ed. Being able to talk and have those soft people skills were very important. Knowing the history is very important. It becomes also another way to contact and talk to people. Keep adding each piece of your puzzle together. I think
Yeah.
when you finally do decide to launch your own business and go into it, it's not like you forgot about all those things. It's now like they're additional tools to your tool belt.
Totally. And I think I don't know if you experienced this, but there were sort of two things. Well, actually, let me say this first. For me, it was the universe is going to give you the lesson until you learn it. And like, I feel like, again, looking back at the past 4 or 5 years, I was like, oh yeah, I probably should have done it then. Oh yeah, I probably should have done it then. Oh yeah, you lost 15 pounds because you weren't eating and you literally had to remind yourself to breathe during meetings. Like, maybe you should have done it then, right? And so it can be scary, but I also think that I felt like it was all or nothing, right? Like, and I made a promise to myself when I started. It's called very creative. Okay, it's called DeFord Coaching and Consulting. I know that's a wild wild business name, but I was like, if this works, awesome. It also doesn't mean you have to do it forever. If it doesn't work, that's okay too. Be open to the experience of what is going to unfold and become as part of this. And I think the one of the biggest um hesitations that I had at that fork in the road was, what are people going to think of me? And like that judgment. And I was sort of making up this story in my head about it. And I really had to kind of coach myself through it and be like, well, if a client came to you with this, what would you say to that person? And really work through that. And it's a lot harder doing it for yourself than with someone else, honestly. And I also had a moment where I was like, I think people who do multiple things are so cool. Like, why am I judging myself for this when I think it's awesome when people have had multi hyphenate careers and titles? And I also think it's cool for people who have done things for 30 years. That's their story. What do you want your story to be? And so that, kind of got me over that hurdle. And I still struggle with it a little bit. I still sometimes I'm like, okay, like, am I showing up the way I really want to, or am I kind of going back to that older version of myself? But it's all part of the process, right?
Megan, I couldn't agree more. And it's funny you mention that because, as you know, we tell our clients one thing and sometimes we're doing the exact opposite. And we know what we're telling our clients is the right thing to do, but we're not doing it ourselves. And
Yeah.
I have to laugh so hard because I remember that when I just, when education was going to be the path, had this vision of being a teacher. And then, move into the next chapter. And I lived in Minnesota for a while with some of my old college rugby teammates.
Yeah.
And I remember leaving them because I moved down to Atlanta for the opportunity at the Hall of Fame. And part of me was like, oh, how are my friends going to think or feel, that I'm gone now? And I don't want it to sound bad, but they're just fine.
Yeah.
Life goes on. They're married, have kids, all that stuff. And
Yeah.
I think for me, it was that little bit of a wake up call. It's not like they don't miss you. It's not like they don't love seeing you. I'm going there next weekend to hang out with them. But I think you realize that part of your chapter, fortunately, or I think unfortunately, depends on how you look at it. I think it's a fortunate thing that your path isn't going to look like everyone else's. And that's amazing. And I would prefer that for myself, after some reflection on it, that it's, living in so many different states and cities and kind of having that whole world of experience that,
Yeah.
as you mentioned, some people do that job for 30 years and they love every second of it. They have their, white picket fence and they've lived in the same town and have two kids and, all that great stuff. And I think there's obviously, joy in that. But I think for me, it was letting myself realize that, oh, hey, this is going to be my own adventure. It's going to seem wild and crazy and kind of cool as you mentioned it. And it's funny because I think a lot of that is getting rid of whatever's inside of us that has that kind of fear. And I know there's fear to kind of keep us safe. That's kind of
Yeah.
the whole idea of the fear. But I think once you kind of can embrace that, I always say it's like a roller coaster. You're going
Mhm.
up, and then when you hit down, the first time you're on a roller coaster, it's terrifying.
Yeah.
Now, for me at least, it's a little less scary. It's almost more exciting because I
Yeah.
know this pit in my stomach is going to happen, but I know at the end it's going to level out. I'll be fine, and it's now more for me. I'm more embracing new things and new opportunities.
Yeah, 100%. And one of the things that when I talk to my clients, I say to them, like, what is this fear? What is this judgment? What is this, this scarcity mindset, whatever? What is it trying to protect you from? And like getting underneath of that. And um, I think that's a really interesting point to think about, because what you were just saying about, like, there's nothing wrong with the 2.5 kids, white picket fence, whatever. But the reality is, like, that's not everybody's life goal. And so many times I know I was performing to expectations. I wasn't living my life. And that's exactly who I work with now. And I always try and think about it in this way of like, there is a future version of myself that is begging me to make these choices. And when I'm not 100% sure, when I'm in that front seat of the roller coaster and I see, like, oh boy, we're about to drop, like, I ask her what I'm supposed to do. Like, what would she do in this situation? And that has made it so much easier for me to, kind of make these decisions. And I look back at different parts of my life, and we all have those like inflection moments. Even if it's not a fork in the road, it's like, you know what? You made that decision because you knew there was a future ahead of you of great possibility and great expectations. And sometimes those outcomes were very traditional, and other times they're not traditional at all, and that's awesome. So yeah, it is really interesting to think about, like, how in those moments we think we externalize what other people are going to think about us versus coming back to ourselves, and it's like, wait, what do you want? Like, what is it that is going to make you happy and you fulfilled? And it's a dance, right? It's a balance there, but if we can come back to ourselves, I think that's the really important part, and just own it, right? Even if I don't really believe in failure, but even if things don't go the way you planned, you're now a different person and you have new experience, and you can take that into this next chapter. And that's a really wonderful, beautiful thing.
Megan, I couldn't agree more. And it's funny, and I think one of the most difficult positions I think you and I both are in was when you're in that job, that fundraising job or that museum, and everything is just fine.
Yeah.
It's and maybe even on it hints at good. It's not terrible. You're not like miserable. You're not crawling out of your skin every day, but you're like, oh, all right, well, this is okay.
Yeah.
And I think that ability of complacency is like the most terrifying thing ever. I always joke I was always the world's worst employee. Like the second I got jobs, I was figuring out my next move, and that again, as you mentioned those hints, I remember getting the job at the College Football Hall of Fame, and like day two, I'm like, oh, I'm not going to be here forever, and I just realized this at 25.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I'm the historian and curator at a sports museum. This is all I worked for,
Yeah.
and okay, I'm like done, and it's day two, and I'm like, I'm not done that second, but I know a
Yeah.
couple
Yeah.
years
Yeah.
later, I will be done, and I start figuring out my next move, and that's probably a hint that I probably wasn't a great employee because I'm trying to weasel my way out the second I get in a place. But it's funny because it was a great experience, and it was a good experience. But I think there's something to be said about continue to scratch that surface of okay, I don't want my life to just be okay or good, and
Yeah.
it's always like I think figuring out what's next in the best way possible.
Yeah.
And I just think it's important for people to kind of have those experiences if that's what they're seeking, you know?
Yeah. And I do a lot of work rooted in values, because I think if you are aligning your decisions to your values, your values show up in your calendar, your values show up in your decisions. And like, value seems like such a like antiquated, almost like religious term or something like that, but it's really not, right? And like, I wrote mine down today. My values are authenticity, adventure, optimism, belonging, impact. And so when I was working in fundraising, I think in threes, and I'm like, these are our three goals, and if the work you're doing doesn't fit one of those three things, don't do it. And that's what I do with my values now. And so it allows you so much flexibility in terms of your actions, but doesn't betray who you are as a person. And I have a feeling we're very similar in the sense of like, I'm interested in everything. Like, my poor friends know I go down these rabbit holes, like the Ocean Gate implosion, like Mount Everest tourism, like all of that. Like, it's probably why I was an English major, because it intersects with everything in time and culture and history, and so for me, that like adventure is just like eating everything up and seeing where it goes. And that's one of the things that I realized in fundraising. I got to travel so many places and meet so many interesting people who were doing fascinating things and change, like literally changing lives at scale. There were kids who could not go to college if we didn't raise that money. There was research that couldn't be done if we didn't raise that money. And that's like super cool and exciting. But what I realized was like, fundraising isn't the only way that you can do that. And who knows what my next chapter is going to look like. So I think the ability to be open to that, if people are listening to this conversation and hearing what we're saying, and it's sort of like, yeah, I have that feeling, I have that sort of like knowing or like calling or something like that. Get in touch with your values and then start figuring out like what decisions honor that and honor me and allow for that like expansion of yourself. And again, it doesn't even have to be professional. It can be in hobbies, it can be in trying food, meeting people. Like there's so many different ways to go about it. I'm not a big believer in like blowing up your life. I don't think you should do that, frankly. I think you should take all of your experiences, exactly what you said, what's your origin story, right? Like define your story and then define what the next chapter is going to be. And when you look at it that way, it's more exciting than like oh my god, what am I doing with my life?
Megan, I couldn't agree more. But it's so funny because it is those experiences and, turning your hobbies or passions, who knows, it might actually make you money one day. It's
Totally.
it's wild that I've traveled this. I left the museum, I left everything last May.
Okay.
And since then, I've gone go all over the country covering the men and women's national teams for USA Rugby.
Yeah.
I'm heavily involved in something that was already a passion of mine, and now I found a way to actually get income from it. But
Yeah.
in general, it's so much of that trying those new things and seeing, and I think it's the beauty of owning your own business. You can even decide who you want to work with.
Yep.
And you can start creating, I guess you could call them profiles of the people that you work best with, the people you enjoy being around. And that's the beauty of creating a business. Of course, are you going to love every client? No, probably not. But you can love most of them. And you
Sure.
can really enjoy most of them. And I think it's one of those really amazing things that now at this position, just a year in, I can start kind of choosing who, again, you mentioned those values. Do you align with my values? And do I have to explicitly say it? No. But I can start thinking, okay, family is really important to me.
Yeah.
If you're a terrible husband or wife or parent, and we probably won't fit because
Yeah.
you don't know your kids, you don't
Right.
spend time, anything like that, and maybe that's probably not the best person to work with.
Right.
That being said, you can start looking at your values and okay, they really align with me. And it's funny because a lot of my clients are female entrepreneurs,
Oh.
and it's I think we just get each other better, and it's one of those things I've really enjoyed to kind of discover that about myself and who I enjoy working with. And
Hmm.
I know about your business, but I feel like it's very similar in the sense of who you've begun to work with.
Yeah. Yeah. And I don't know if you feel this way. I have always felt like, and sports and music. I also played trumpet for many, many years, almost went into it professionally. And trumpet is a loud instrument. Like, and if you don't hit the note, everybody hears it, right? Like, and you got to keep going. And I feel like the metaphors in life between sports and music have really helped shape me. But I feel like rugby in particular has been such a positive metaphor in life for me of like, know that you've got people who are gonna come behind you and tackle, like get rid of that ball, know someone's gonna be there, and you've got to get behind, right? And so like it is one of the sports that I've played that I think has been the most confidence building and like trust building for my life. And it's so cool that you're still a part of it. But I think about that a lot. Like you're not going to drop the ball and you're going to have people who are right behind you. Like you got to duck down, cover your head and let them go ahead of you. Like, that kind of thing. And it's been a really, I like that we have that sport in common because like I think it really has actually helped me in my career and especially now. Like trust factor that you have to have in order to be a successful rugby player. Um, it has definitely helped me when I'm not exactly sure what the next step is going to be.
I couldn't agree more, and I appreciate you said that because it's so much of that, everything from that trust that people have your back. Because, of course, as you know, rugby, it can get dangerous, especially if you don't have that trust for your teammates and you don't have, of course, trust in yourself, as you mentioned, building that confidence. But I think it goes everything from that communication as a scrum half, I'm sure you were telling everyone where to be on the pitch, and as
Yeah.
a forward, I'm listening to you because I trust you, and I want to, with forwards sometimes we're a little more performative, so we want our backs to be happy with us, but I think
Yeah.
it also is having that open communication, whether you're thinking about it in that moment or not. I think down the road it really helps to have that confidence, and I think believe in yourself as well.
Yeah. Yep. Yep, and build that team. Like you said, the people that you want to work with, the people you realize you work well with, and own that, right? Like don't you can't be everything to everybody, which is something that I learned the hard way too. Like I thought, "Oh no, you can." And I'll never forget, I had a board member who said, if you don't have haters, you're doing it wrong. And like young, innocent Megan was like, I don't agree with that. And I was like, yeah, now I get it. Like I am not for everybody, and that's okay. Like that's totally fine. But we get to create our team and we get to create our people. So, um, yeah. So yeah, it's pretty cool.
It really is. Title of the podcast, Into the Unknown, and we got into a little bit. What are you working
Yeah.
on now, and where can people find more about what you do?
Yeah, for sure. So I talked a little bit about what I do in one-on-one coaching with women. And really, the easiest way to think about it is to step actually into that version of yourself that you've sort of been circling. So I often describe it to women as like, you've made the vision boards, you have the goals, you've written them down, but you haven't taken action. And so we do 90 days, one focus goal with a real plan, real support. And it's been really fun. And it's not one area, which is really cool. Like sometimes people think it's like, oh, in my career, but women have come to me like, I want to run a marathon. And it's not that I'm a running coach, it's that let's get your plan in a place that actually works for your life and have accountability and support, and it's all rooted in your values. Um, so that's what I'm doing professionally, and people can find me at megdeford.com, and all of my socials are Meg DeFord. So YouTube, Instagram, TikTok. I just discovered Threads, which like why have I been waiting on Threads? It's so fun. Um, and like I said, I have a podcast. Wait, what do you do again? That's a really fun one. One of my favorite, and I've loved all of my guests, but one of my favorite guests. I have two favorite guests if people want to listen. One was Father Nathan Castle, who he's a Dominican priest who helps like trapped souls move on in the afterlife. It was a wild conversation. And then another interesting one was Dr. Nikki Brock, who studies the witch trials in Calvinist Scotland. It was fascinating. It was wild, but all of them are really good. I run a women's running group. I coach soccer. I have two kids. So staying busy, doing lots of stuff, and you can follow everything that I'm doing on my socials. And if you want to reach out, feel free. Like you probably have realized today, I'm a yapper and I love to listen. So I would love to meet you.
Well, Megan, I want to say I truly appreciated this conversation. I really enjoyed this. I'm excited it worked out, and
Yeah.
I can't wait to see your journey continue to unfold.
Yeah, absolutely. And right back at you. Let's definitely stay in touch. And like, I really mean that. Let's stay in touch and, you know, keep the conversation going.
We'll talk soon.
Cool. Thanks.
Another fun episode of Into the Unknown. I truly appreciate you taking the time to listen. And if it provides you any value or entertainment, I would love if you shared it with others, liked, subscribed, and really just help the podcast grow. Again, tell a friend, tell a foe, just anyone who might enjoy hearing some stories of people's own journeys and what got them to where they are today. Till next time.